Good morning or good afternoon, hoops and hockey fans. Big Al here on this Monday, February 24th, 2025, and it's time for our weekly look at the current standings across the National Basketball Association and the National Hockey League. Games, of course, played through yesterday, Sunday, February 23rd. We'll look at the NBA first, and then we'll go over to the NHL and we'll look at the playoff races in both leagues. So stick around and like, comment, and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell every time I go live. Off we go. We'll start in the NBA. Games played through February 23rd. We'll start in the Eastern Conference, as the Cleveland Cavaliers are atop the Eastern Conference with a record of 47-10. They are 27-4 at home, 20-6 on the road, 9-1 versus the Central Division, 31-7 versus the East. They average 122.9 points per game and allow 111.8 for an average point differential of plus 11.1. And they are one of the hottest teams in basketball, winners of 7 straight, and they are 9-1 in their last 10 games. Keeping pace with the Celtics and sitting in the number 2 spot in the East are the Boston Celtics at 41-16. They are 6 games out from the top spot in the East, only 18-10 at home, but real good on the road at 23-6. They are 9-2 versus the Atlantic Division, 30-9 versus the East. They average 117.4 points per game and allow 108. Average point differential is plus 9.4. They've won 5 in a row, and they are also 9-1 over their last 10 games. The New York Knicks, second place in the Atlantic Division, currently sitting third in the East with a record of 37-20. 10 games behind Cleveland. 20-10 at home, 17-10 on the road, 9-3 versus the Atlantic, 26-13 against the East. They average 117.9 points per game and allow 113.1. Average point differential is plus 4.8. They're kind of sliding a little. They've dropped 2 in a row, and they're 6-4 in their last 10 games. The number 4 seed in the East presently are the Indiana Pacers at 32-23. They are 14 behind the Cavaliers in both the Central Division and the Eastern Conference. They are 16-8 at home, 15-14 on the road, 6-4 versus the Central, 18-16 versus the East. They average 116.5 points per game, allow 115.5. Average point differential is plus 1. They've won 3 straight games, and they are 7-3 over their last 10. The 5 seed in the East presently are the Milwaukee Bucks at 32-24. 14.5 games out of the Central and the Eastern Conference behind the Cavs. 19-9 at home, only 12-15 on the road. 6-5 versus the Central, 25-16 versus the East. They average 114.2 points per game while giving up 112.6. Average point differential per game is plus 1.6. They've won 4 straight games, and they are 6-4 in their last 10. The number 6 seed and the last team to get into the traditional playoffs are the Detroit Pistons, 31-26. They are 4th in the Central Division, 16 games behind the Cavs. 14-13 at home, 17-13 on the road, 4-9 versus the Central, 22-20 versus the East. They average 114.4 points per game and allow 113.6. Average point differential per game is plus 0.8. They're hot too. They've won 6 in a row, and they're 8-2 in their last 10. The next 4 teams would make the play-in tournament. Currently in the number 7 spot, you have the Orlando Magic, the current leaders of the Southeast Division at 29-30. They are 19 behind Cleveland for number 1 in the East. 18-11 at home, 11-19 on the road, 8-3 versus the Southeast, and 23-16 against the conference. They average only 104.3 points per game, which is the lowest among all Eastern Conference teams. But they only allow 105.2 points per game, which is the best in the East. Average point differential is minus 0.9. They won their last game, and they're 5-5 over their last 10 games. The second place team in the Southeast is currently the number 8 team in the East, and that's the Miami Heat. 26-29 record, 20 games behind the Cavaliers for number 1 in the East. 12-11 at home, 13-18 on the road. They have a 5-3 division record against the Southeast and 15-17 versus the East as a whole. They average 110.1 points per game, allow 110.9. Average point differential is minus 0.8 per game. They lost their most recent matchup, and they're kind of cold. They're 3-7 in their last 10. The number 9 seed in the East is the current third place team in the Southeast, and that's the Atlanta Hawks at 26-31. They are 21 back of Cleveland for the top spot in the East. 12-14 at home, 14-16 on the road. They are pretty good against Southeast Division opponents at 6-3 and 19-16 versus the East. They average 117 points per game, allow 119.6. Average point margin per game is minus 2.6. They've dropped 3 in a row, and they are 4-6 over their last 10 games. And the last team in the Eastern Conference to make the play-in tournament at the present time are the Chicago Bulls at 22-35. They are 25 games out behind Cleveland for first in the Central and in the Eastern Conference. And at this point, they're pretty much eliminated from getting the top spot in the East at this point. They are 10-20 at home, 12-15 on the road, 3-9 versus the Central. They have a 17-21 record against Eastern Conference opponents. They average 115.9 points per game, allow 120.6. Average point margin is minus 4.7. And they've lost 6 in a row, and they sit 2-8 over their last 10 games. And the final 5 teams in the East are outside of the play-in tournament. Well, this next team is playing a lot better, and that's the Brooklyn Nets at 21-35. They are 25.5 games out behind the Cavs, 9-18 at home, 12-17 on the road, 3-8 versus the Atlantic, 12-24 versus the East. They average 104.9 points per game and allow 110.8. Average point margin is minus 5.9 per game. They won their last game, and again, they're playing a lot better. They're 7-3 over their last 10. Next are the Philadelphia 76ers at 20-36. 26.5 games behind Cleveland. 10-19 at home, 10-17 on the road, 3-8 versus the Atlantic, 14-22 versus the East. They average 108.9 points per game, allow 113 per game. Average point margin per game is minus 4.1. They've lost 7 in a row, and they are 1-9 over their last 10. So they are really, really cold. Rounding out the Atlantic Division is the 13th place team in the East, the Toronto Raptors, at 18-39. 29 games behind Cleveland for first in the East, 13-18 at home, but an abysmal 5-21 on the road. They are 4-7 versus the Atlantic and 11-25 in the East. They average 110.9 points per game and allow 116.4 points per game, for an average point margin of minus 5.5. They did win their last game, but they are 3-7 in their last 10. In 14th place in the East are the Charlotte Hornets at 14-41. They are 32 games out behind Cleveland, so it's a pretty good chance they will not get the top seed in the East, even if they went out. 9-20 at home, 5-21 on the road. They are still winless against Southeastern Division opponents at 0-10, and they are 7-30 versus the East. They average 106 points per game, allow 112.3. Average point margin per game is -6.3. They've lost back-to-back games, and they sit 2-8 over their last 10. And then rounding out the Eastern Conference with the worst overall record in the NBA are the Washington Wizards at 9-47. They are 37.5 games behind Cleveland for the top spot in the East. 5-24 at home, 4-22 on the road, a respectable 5-5 against the Southeast, and 7-25 versus the East. They average 108.1 points per game and allow 121.4. Average point margin per game is -13.3, which is also the worst in the league. They've lost 6 straight, and they are 3-7 over their last 10 games. So to recap the Eastern Conference, the top 6 that would make the playoffs would be Cleveland, Boston, New York, Indiana, Milwaukee, and Detroit. Orlando, Miami, Atlanta, and Chicago would be the 4 teams into the play-in tournament. Brooklyn is only a half game behind the Bulls for that last play-in spot. Philly is 1.5 games back. Toronto is 4 games back. Charlotte is 7 games back. And Washington is 12.5 games out of the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference. Now we're going to jump on over to the West. The top team in the West is the Oklahoma City Thunder with a record of 46-10. They are 25-3 at home, 20-7 on the road, 9-2 versus their division, the Northwest Division, and they are 27-9 in the West. They average 118.3 points per game and allow 105.3. Average point margin is +13. They've won 2 straight, and they sit 9-1 over their last 10. The Memphis Grizzlies are the 2 seed in the West at 37-20. They are 9.5 games out behind Oklahoma City. 21-6 at home, 16-14 on the road, 8-4 versus their division, the Southwest, and 20-14 in the conference. They average a league-high 122.8 points per game while allowing 116 per game. Average point margin is +6.8. They lost their last game, and they are 6-4 over their last 10. And a virtual tie for the number 2 seed in the East are the Denver Nuggets, also 37-20, and also 9.5 games behind the Thunder. The Nuggets are 20-9 at home, 17-11 on the road, 6-4 versus the Northwest, 22-13 versus the West. They average 121.3 points per game while allowing 116 for an average point margin of +5.3. Like Memphis, Denver also lost their most recent game, but they are 9-1 over their last 10. The current Pacific Division leaders, the Los Angeles Lakers, sit in the number 4 spot at 34-21. They are 11.5 games behind OKC. 19-7 at home, 15-14 on the road, 9-3 versus the Pacific, 22-10 record versus the West. They average 113.1 points per game while giving up 111.8 for an average point margin of +1.3. They've won back-to-back games, and they are 8-2 in their last 10. The Houston Rockets, kind of sputtering a little bit. They fall to the number 5 spot at 35-22. They are 11.5 games behind the Thunder, just like the Lakers are. But as far as percentages goes, the LA Lakers are the 4 seed, and as mentioned, Houston is the 5. The Rockets are 18-9 at home, 17-12 on the road, 9-3 versus the Southwest, 21-14 record in the Western Conference. They average 112.9 points per game while giving up 109 per game. Average point margin is plus 3.9. They've dropped their last game, and they are 3-7 over their previous 10. So they're kind of trending in the wrong direction right now. The Los Angeles Clippers would be the 6th and final team to make the playoffs at this point with a record of 31-25. They are 15 back of the Thunder for tops in the West. 19-10 at home, 12-15 on the road, 6-4 versus the Pacific, and 20-18 in the West. They average 110.9 points per game while allowing 108.5. Average point margin is plus 2.4. They've dropped 2 straight, and they are 5-5 in their last 10. Alright, the next 4 teams would get into the play-in tournament. Currently at the number 7 spot, you have the Minnesota Timberwolves at 31-27, 16 games behind the Thunder. 16-14 at home, 15-13 on the road, 6-4 versus the Northwest, 23-16 record versus the West. They average 111.8 points per game while giving up 108.7. Average point margin is plus 3.1. They've lost 2 in a row, and they're 4-6 in their last 10. Also with the same record, you've got the Dallas Mavericks at 31-27. They would presently be the 8th seed in the West. They are 16 back of Oklahoma City for the top spot in the Western Conference. 18-11 at home, just 13-16 on the road, 7-4 versus the Southwest, 22-19 record versus the West. They average 115.4 points per game, allow 113.5. Average point margin is plus 1.9. They dropped their last game, and they are 5-5 over their last 10. In the 9 spot, you have the Golden State Warriors at 30-27. 16.5 games behind Oklahoma City. 16-13 at home, 14-14 on the road. But really, really bad in the Pacific Division, 2-10. And 20-19 versus the Western Conference. They average 112.5 points per game while allowing 111.4. Average point margin is plus 1.1. They've won 3 straight and sit 6-4 over their last 10 games. And the final team to get into the play-in tournament, if the season ended right now, are the Sacramento Kings at 28-28. 18 back of the Thunder for first in the West. They have matching 14-14 records both at home and on the road. Only 4-7 versus the Pacific Division, and 19-19 versus the East, or rather the West. Sorry about that. They average 116.6 points per game, allow 116.3 points per game. Average point margin is plus 0.3. They've dropped 2 in a row, and they sit 4-6 over their last 10. Outside of the play-in tournament, you've got the Phoenix Suns at 27-30. Currently 19.5 games out behind the Thunder for first in the West. 16-11 record at home, 11-19 on the road. They are 7-4 versus the Pacific and 17-18 against the West. They average 113.2 points per game while allowing 115.3. Average point margin for the Suns is minus 2.1. They dropped their last game, and they are ice cold, 2-8 over their last 10 games. Next, in 12th place are the San Antonio Spurs at 24-31, 21.5 games behind Oklahoma City, 14-13 at home, but just 9-17 on the road. 2-8 versus the Southwest, 17-19 in the conference. They average 112.7 points per game, and they allow 114.5 points per game. Average point margin is minus 1.8. They dropped back-to-back games, and they are 3-7 over their last 10. In 13th place in the West, you've got the Portland Trailblazers at 24-33, 22.5 games out behind the Thunder. 16-14 record at home, 8-19 on the road, 4-8 versus the Northwest, and 14-28 in the West overall. They average 109.6 points per game while allowing 114.3. Average point margin per game is minus 4.7. They won their last game and they're 6-4 over their last 10. In 14th place, you've got the Utah Jazz at 14-42. Pretty much pulling them and the Pelicans out of the running for the top spot in the West, as Utah sits 32 games out. 7-20 at home, 7-22 on the road. 1-8 record versus the Northwest, which is not good. 6-33 record against the conference, which also is not good. They average 112.4 points per game, allow 119.5. Average point margin is minus 7.1. They won their last game, and they are 4-6 in their last 10. And rounding out the Western Conference, you've got the New Orleans Pelicans at 14-43, 32.5 games behind the Thunder. 10-19 at home, but real battle on the road, 4-24. 2-9 record versus the Southwest, and 8-27 overall. They average 110.5 points per game and allow 118.9. Average point margin is minus 8.4. They won their last game, but they are 2-8 over their last 10. So recapping the West, the top 6 teams to make the playoffs as of right now would be Oklahoma City, Memphis, Denver, the LA Lakers, Houston, and the LA Clippers. Minnesota, Dallas, Golden State, and Sacramento would be in to the play-in tournament. And outside of the playoffs, Phoenix is a game and a half behind Sacramento for that last play-in spot. San Antonio is 3.5 games out. Portland is 4.5 games out. And then Utah is 14 games out, while New Orleans sits 14.5 games out. So those are the NBA standings and the playoff race in that league through February 23rd, as they are just coming off of the All-Star break. Their season resumed on Wednesday. Now we're going to turn our attention to the National Hockey League, who had 13 days off for the Four Nations face-off. They had just resumed play on Saturday, and these are the current records in the NHL through February 23rd. And we'll start with the Eastern Conference. The Toronto Maple Leafs have taken over first place in the Atlantic Division. 57 games played, 35 wins, 20 losses, and 2 overtime losses for 72 points. 30 wins in regulation, 35 in regulation and overtime, and no shootout record for the Leafs. They are 20-11 at home, 15-9-2 on the road. They've scored 180 goals, allowed 161. Differential is plus 19. They are 6-4 in their last 10, and they've won 2 straight. In second place in the Atlantic, you've got the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers with a record of 58, with 58 games played and a record of 34, 21, and 3 for 71 points. 28 wins in regulation, 30 in regulation or overtime, and they are a perfect 4-0 in the shootout. 17, 10, and 2 home record versus a 17, 11, and 1 road record. Scored 193 goals, allowed 167 for a differential of plus 26. They are 6-4 in their last 10, but they did lose their last matchup. The Tampa Bay Lightning would sit third in this division, 56 games played, 32, 20, and 4 record for 68 points. 27 regulation wins, 31 regulation and overtime wins. 1 win and 1 loss in the shootout. 19, 7, and 2 record at home, 13, 13, and 2 record on the road. They've scored 201 goals and allowed 154 for a goal margin. Scoring margin of plus 47. They are 7-2 and 1 over their last 10 games, including 5 straight wins. So they are on a heater right now. In fourth place, you've got the Detroit Red Wings. 57 games played, 29, 22, and 6 record for 64 points. 21 regulation wins, 26 in regulation and overtime. 3-0 in the shootout. They are 16, 12, and 3 at home, 13, 10, and 3 on the road. Scored 168 goals, allowed 179. Goal differential is minus 11. They're pretty hot too. They are 8-1-1 over their last 10, and they did win their most recent game. Struggling a little bit in fifth place, you've got the Ottawa Senators. 57 games played and a record of 29, 24, and 4 for 62 points. 22 regulation wins, 28 wins in regulation and overtime, 1-1 in the shootout. Very good home record, 16, 8, and 2. Their road record, not so much, at 13, 16, and 2. They've scored 160 goals, allowed 161. Goal differential is minus 1. They are 5-5 over their last 10, but they have lost 4 games in a row as they are trying to stay in the Eastern Conference playoff race. The Boston Bruins, who are in danger of missing the playoffs for the first time in a while, they sit 6th in the Atlantic. 58 games, 27, 24, and 7 record for 61 points. 20 wins in regulation, 27 in regulation or overtime, 0-1 in the shootout. They are 18, 9, and 4 at home, which is real good. Not so much on the road at 9, 15, and 3. They scored 159 goals while giving up 185. Scoring differential is minus 26. They are 4-5-1 over their last 10, including 3 straight losses. In 7th place, you've got the Montreal Canadiens. 57 games played and a record of 26, 26, and 5 for 57 points. 19 wins in regulation, 24 in both regulation and overtime, and 2-2 in the shootout. They are 13, 12, and 4 at home, and 13, 14, and 1 on the road. They've scored 168 goals while giving up 196 for a scoring margin of minus 28. They are ice cold though, 2-7-1 over their last 10. However, they did win their last game. And rounding out the Atlantic Division, you've got the Buffalo Sabres. 55 games played and a record of 23, 27, and 5 for 51 points. 19 regulation wins, 21 wins in regulation and overtime, and 2-1 in the shootout. They are 14, 12, and 3 at home, but 9, 15, and 2 on the road. They scored 179 goals while giving up 187 for a differential of -8. 6 and 4 though in their last 10, which is good, and they did win their most recent game. Shifting over to the Metropolitan Division, that's where you'll find your front runners for the President's Trophy, and that's the Washington Capitals. 57 games played, 38, 11, and 8 for 84 points. 33 wins in regulation, 38 in regulation and overtime, but the shootout has not been their friend. They are 0 and 3. 18, 4, and 6 at home, 27 and 2 on the road. They've scored 211 goals, allowed 146. Goal differential is +65. They are 6, 1, and 3 in their last 10, including 2 straight wins. The Carolina Hurricanes are in second place, 57 games played, and a record of 33, 20, and 4 for 70 points. 29 regulation wins, 33 in regulation or overtime, and 0 and 2 in the shootout. They're pretty much untouchable at home. They are 21, 6, and 1 on home ice, and 12, 14, and 3 on the road. 187 goals scored, 160 allowed. Goal differential is +27. They are 5, 4, and 1 in their last 10, and they did lose their most recent. In a points tie for second place in the Metro Division are the New Jersey Devils. 59 games played and a record of 32, 21, and 6 for 70 points. 28 regulation wins, 31 in regulation or overtime, and 1 and 1 in the shootout. They are 15, 10, and 4 at home, 17, 11, and 2 on opposing ice. 182 goals scored to 146 allowed, gives them a goal differential of +36. They are 6 and 4 in their last 10, and they won their most recent game as well. In fourth place, you've got the Columbus Blue Jackets. 57 games played, 27, 22, and 8 record for 62 points. 19 regulation wins, 23 in regulation or overtime, and they are 4 and 1 in the shootout. 18, 6, and 4 at home, which is really good. 9, 16, and 4 on the road. They've scored 189 goals, allowed 187. Goal differential is +2. They are 5, 4, and 1 in their last 10, including a win in their most recent game. Starting to climb back into the Eastern Conference playoff race, you've got the New York Rangers sitting 5th in the Metro. 57 games played and a record of 28, 25, and 4 for 60 points. 26 regulation wins, 27 in regulation and overtime, 1 and 0 in the shootout. They are 14, 12, and 2 at home, 14, 13, and 2 on the road. They scored 172 goals while allowing 179. Goal differential is -7. They are 5 and 5 over their last 10, including a victory in their most recent game. In sixth place, you've got the New York Islanders. 56 games played and a record of 25, 24, and 7 for 57 points. 19 regulation wins, 23 regulation and overtime wins, and they sit 2 and 1 in the shootout. 13, 12, and 2 record at home versus 12, 12, and 5 on the road. They've scored 155 goals while allowing 166. Goal differential is -11. They are 6 and 4 in their last 10, but they've lost 3 in a row. In seventh place, you've got the Philadelphia Flyers. 58 games played, 25, 26, and 7 record for 57 points. 16 regulation wins, 22 in regulation or overtime, 3 and 3 in the shootout. 14, 13, and 1 at home, 11, 13, and 6 on the road. They've scored 168 goals while giving up 195. Goal differential is minus 27. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10, including 2 straight wins. And then wrapping up the Metropolitan Division and the Eastern Conference are the Pittsburgh Penguins. 59 games played and a record of 23, 27, and 9 for 55 points. 16 regulation wins, 22 in regulation or overtime, 1 and 5 in the shootout. They are 13, 12, and 4 at home, 10, 15, and 5 on the road. They've scored 170 goals while giving up 214. Goal differential for the Penguins is minus 44. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10, and they've lost 3 in a row. And we'll update the playoff races in just a moment. Now we're going to turn our attention to the Western Conference. Starting off in the Central Division, which is led by the Winnipeg Jets. 57 games played, 40, 14, and 3 record for 83 points. 33 regulation wins, 39 in regulation and overtime, 1 and 0 in the shootout. They are 22, 5, and 3 at home, 18 and 9 on the road. They've scored 206 goals while allowing 137. Their goal differential is the best in the NHL at plus 69. They are 9-1 in their last 10, including 9 straight wins. So yes, they are on a heater as well. Second place team in the Central, you've got the Dallas Stars. 57 games played, 37, 18, and 2 for 76 points. 31 regulation wins, 35 in regulation and overtime, 2 and 1 in the shootout. They have a 27-1 home record, and on enemy ice, they're 17, 11, and 1. They scored 190 goals and allowed 144 for a goal differential of plus 46. They are 8-1-1 in their last 10, including 3 straight wins. The Minnesota Wild are in third place with a record of 57 games played and a record of 34, 19, and 4 for 72 points. 27 regulation wins, 32 in regulation and overtime. 2-2 is their shootout record. They are 13, 12, and 1 at home, but they're real good on the road. 21, 7, and 3 outside the Twin Cities. They've scored 167 goals while allowing 162. Goal differential is plus 5. They are 6-4 in their last 10, and they also won 3 in a row. In fourth place, you've got the Colorado Avalanche. 59 games played, 33, 24, and 2 for 68 points. 28 regulation wins, 32 in regulation or overtime, 1 and 1 in the shootout. They are 16, 10, and 2 at home, 17 and 14 on the road. They've scored 188 goals, allowed 179. Goal differential is plus 9. They are 5-5 over their last 10, and they've dropped back-to-back games. Fifth place is the Utah Hockey Club. 58 games played, 25, 24, and 9 for 59 points. 17 regulation wins, 24 in regulation and overtime, 1 and 2 in the shootout. They are 10, 12, and 6 at home, 15, 12, and 3 on the road. They've scored 163 goals while allowing 176. Goal differential is minus 13. 4, 4, and 2 over their last 10, and a win in their most recent. The St. Louis Blues are currently in 6th place in the Central. 58 games played, 26, 26, and 6 for 58 points. 18 regulation wins, 23 regulation and overtime wins, and 3 and 1 in the shootout. They are 13, 14, and 3 at home, 13, 12, and 3 on the road. They've scored 160 goals while giving up 176. Goal differential is minus 16. They are 3-5-2 in their last 10, but they did win their most recent game. In 7th place are the Nashville Predators. 56 games played, 20-29-7 record for 47 points. 17 regulation wins, 19 in regulation or overtime, 1-0 in the shootout. They are 14-11-3 at home, 6-18-4 on the road. They've scored 146 goals, allowed 185. Goal differential is -39. They are 3-7 in their last 10, including a loss in their most recent game. Rounding out the Central Division are the Chicago Blackhawks. 57 games played, 17-33-7 record for 41 points. 15 regulation wins, 16 in regulation or overtime, 1-2 in the shootout. They are 11-15-3 at home, and they have the same road record as Nashville, 6-18-4. They scored 152 goals, allowed 201. Goal differential is -49. They are 2-5-3 over their last 10, including 3 straight losses. And now we're off to the Pacific Division, where it's a 2, maybe even a 3-team race at this point. The Vegas Golden Knights are on top of the Pacific. 57 games played, 34-17-6 record for 74 points. 31 regulation wins, 33 in regulation and overtime, and 1-2 in the shootout. They are 26-3 at home, 14-11-3 away from Sin City. They scored 188 goals, allowed 156. Goal differential is +32. They are 5-3-2 in their last 10, including 3 straight wins. Next, in second place, you've got the Edmonton Oilers. 57 games played, 34-19-4 record for 72 points. 25 regulation wins, 34 in regulation and overtime, 0-1 in the shootout. They are 18-10-2 at home, 16-9-2 on the road. They scored 188 goals and allowed 165 for a goal differential of +23. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10, including 3 straight losses. The Los Angeles Kings are in third place. 54 games played and a record of 30-17-7 for 67 points. 27 regulation wins, 29 in regulation and overtime, 1-2 in the shootout. They probably have the best record percentage-wise at home, 18-3-2. But they're 12-14-5 away from Crypto.com. They scored 156 goals and allowed 139 for a goal differential of +17. They are 5-3-2 in their last 10, including a win in their most recent. The Vancouver Canucks are in fourth place. 57 games played, 26-20-11 record for 63 points. 21 regulation wins, 25 in regulation and overtime, 1-1 in the shootout. 11-10-7 at home, 15-10-4 on the road. They've scored 157 goals, giving up 171. Goal differential is -14. They are 6-3-1 in their last 10, including 2 straight losses. In fifth place are the Calgary Flames. 56 games played, 27-21-8 record for 62 points. 21 regulation wins, 24 in regulation and overtime. And they are 3-1 in the shootout. 17-10-4 record at home, 10-11-4 record on the road. They scored 151 goals, allowed 167. Goal differential was -16. 4-5-1 in their last 10 games, including a win in their last game. In 6th place and turning things around are the Anaheim Ducks. 56 games played, 25-24-7 record for 57 points. 17 regulation wins, 22 in regulation and overtime, 3-2 in the shootout. 13-12-2 at home, 12-12-5 on the road. They've scored 144 goals and allowed 172 for a goal differential of -28. They are 7-2-1 in their last 10, but they did lose their last time out. The Seattle Kraken are in 7th place. 59 games, 25-30-4 record for 54 points. 20 regulation wins, 24 in regulation and overtime, and 1-3 in the shootout. 13-14-4 at home, 12-16 on the road. 172 goals scored, 188 goals allowed for a goal differential of -16. They are 4-5-1 in their last 10, including a loss in their most recent game. And finishing up with the San Jose Sharks. 58 games played, 15-36-7 for an NHL low 37 points. 11 regulation wins, 15 in regulation and overtime. They have yet to win in a shootout this year, 0-4. They are 9-18-2 at home, 6-18-5 on the road. They've scored 150 goals, allowed 219. Their goal scoring margin is -69, which is the worst in the NHL. They are 1-8-1 in their last 10, including 5 straight losses. Okay, so looking at the playoffs in the NHL through February 23rd, Toronto, Florida, and Tampa Bay would be your top 3 teams in the Atlantic Division. Washington, Carolina, and New Jersey would be your top 3 in the Metro. Winnipeg, Dallas, and Minnesota are your top 3 in the Central, while Vegas, Edmonton, and LA are your top 3 in the Pacific Division. Looking at the wild card races, the Red Wings and Senators would be your 2 wild card teams in the Eastern Conference. Columbus is tied with Ottawa for that last wild card spot in the East, as they have 62 points. They both played 57 games, but Ottawa has 2 more regulation wins than Columbus. So that puts the Senators ahead of the Blue Jackets. Boston's not too far. They're only 1 point out. The Rangers are 2 points out at this point. Both the Islanders and Canadiens sit. The Islanders, Canadiens, and Flyers, for that matter, all sit 5 points out. The Penguins are 7 points out, and the Sabres are 11 points out. And in the Western Conference, your 2 wildcard teams would be Colorado and Vancouver. Calgary is just a single point out. Utah is 4 points out. St. Louis is 5 points out. Anaheim 6 points out. Seattle is 9 points out. Nashville is 16 points out. Chicago is 22 points out. And San Jose is a whopping 26 points out of that second wild card spot in the Western Conference. And that's your weekly standings check in both the NBA and NHL through February 23rd. We do this every Monday, and when baseball season starts, we'll probably go about a week and a half of games, and then we'll have the Major League Baseball standings as well. So this takes place every Monday, so make sure you join me every week. As far as my radio fans are concerned, we are going to release the AM radio stations reissue for the Miami Fort Lauderdale market, including West Palm Beach and the Florida Keys. I look to have that video up by Wednesday at the latest. And then we will have the FM stations reissue after that. I want to get that knocked out in the next couple of weeks as well. So again, stay tuned for that as well. In the meantime, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Big Al signing off. Thanks for watching and enjoy all the sports action this week. Peace out.